I prepared today with some notes, can you believe that? And the reason I prepared some notes is because there's a few sides to this question that I just didn't want to miss. I want to kind of cover it all, so it's a little bit more comprehensive. To answer this question, whether trauma is or can be an excuse for bad behavior. As a somatic practitioner who works with trauma, who's trauma-informed and trauma-trained, I think I have some right to talk about this and actually give an answer to this question. I think the first thing to do is to clear out our definitions of what is trauma, and that will help us to understand this topic better. And then I want to delve into kind of looking at this issue from both the perspective of a person who has trauma, who has been affected by trauma, and who could be exhibiting behaviors that then they say like, oh, I did this because of trauma. And then also the person on the receiving end of that behavior. So I think it's really important to cover both of those sides. And just also to add on to my own credentials, if you like, I have been on both of those sides. I am the person who has experienced trauma and has been affected in multitude ways by trauma, which has then affected my behavior. And I've also been in relationships even with people who have been exhibiting trauma-induced behavior, you can say. So I know both sides on a personal level, not just the level of, I am trained in this. So what is trauma and what does it mean to be trauma-informed? Let's start here. First of all, trauma is not an event. That's something, let's just get that in the clear, okay? People think that trauma is the events and things that happen to people. Trauma is an incomplete autonomic system, nervous system, response. Something that was meant to happen didn't happen. We do not choose how to react in the moment. Our autonomic system, the system in our body that has been around since we were reptilians, that is what's in control. A specific part of our brain responsible for that. The part of the brain where people make conscious choices from is prefrontal cortex. It's a completely different part of the brain. So when we say that someone is acting out of trauma, it is not their conscious prefrontal cortex choice to do so. It is their nervous system running the same programs because it believes that a situation that has happened years ago, potentially, is still happening now, in this very moment. Oftentimes we compare trauma to like an incomplete loop or a broken record or a record player that just keeps spinning on the same part of the song, just continues to replay and on and on and on and on, because it's like it can't complete. The state of trauma can be induced not only from things that happened, that shouldn't have happened, but also from things that should have happened and didn't happen. So to clarify, what that means is trauma not only happens from events like boundary violations, car accidents, war, humiliation. It also happens from things like neglect and letting a baby cry it out, withdrawing love, withdrawing affection from a child, which, by the way, physiologically children absolutely need. It's a need for a healthy brain development. Not having access to play as a child, or not having ability to play. As humans, we have certain needs that we do not consciously choose. We simply need them to survive and then thrive as well. The basic physiological needs is sleep, food, shelter, things like that. But we also have emotional needs, which is, I think it's still very difficult for a majority of people to grasp that is a need. Emotional needs are needs, and we don't choose to need them. They're simply inbuilt into our system, because we as humans are not solitary beings. we are supposed to live in relationship to one another. And so we have, from infancy, from birth, we have dependency on people around us. And that does not stop as we grow up. We still need it. When we don't have a lot of these needs met as children, that also creates trauma. Trauma of abandonment, trauma of rejection, trauma of separation, and many other things. From there we can have the emotions of shame and sometimes guilt and fear and rage emerge. And then those emotions, when they don't get processed, when the cycle of those emotions doesn't get completed, they get stuck in the body. And later on in life, they become our traits. And when something is our emotions or states or traits, they turn into behavior and thought patterns and belief systems, all of which is unconscious or subconscious. So to be trauma informed is to understand that behind a person's aggression, behind their shame, behind their avoidance or anxiety or depression or whatever else it might be, that are the symptoms, their behavior or their thoughts, behind all of that facade is a history of something that happened or didn't happen, that then caused their nervous system to react in a certain way that they did not choose. None of us choose how our nervous systems develop and react as when we're children. To explain this a little bit kind of more visually, my trainers of the somatic practice that I do, they give this really good example of a bear. So imagine you're walking through woodland and should I use a bear? Maybe a better example would be like a dog. You're walking through a woodland or you're on a trail and you see a growling, aggressive looking dog standing sort of from behind the bush and kind of scowling at you. And so naturally you are registering it, oh, it's aggressive, don't come up to it, turn the other way, or try to bypass it, or maybe even like tell it to somehow to not be aggressive, whatever you might want to do. But when you look behind the bush that it's standing, kind of, sort of to the side of, when you look behind it, you notice that that dog's paw is stuck in a bear trap. So the aggression that was displayed was actually a tremendous amount of terror and pain. But because we didn't see the trap, because it was hidden behind the bush, we assumed that that dog is aggressive, maybe even has rabies or something, right? It's not well mentally, but it's not unwell mentally, it's unwell physically, and that is then affecting its behavior. It is really very much like the same with humans when it comes to trauma. Trauma being the bear trap that is invisible behind the bush. The bush, you can say, is like the facade of the ego and all the veils that we put over our trauma to hide it, to protect ourselves and everyone else from it. But if we make the subconscious conscious, if we reveal the trap from behind the bush and help that dog get out of that trap safely for us and for the dog, and then get that dog help, or the dog goes and heals, the leg heals naturally, the dog stops being aggressive, because the aggression was never out of evil or malicious intent. It actually never is. Underneath all of these terrible behavior displays that we see in the world is a tremendous amount of terror and shame and pain. Now, this is where people get really even maybe angry, because they think, well, that sounds like we're justifying everyone's behavior. It's like if everyone is just traumatized, then it's like, where's the justice in that? And I get it. So let's talk about that now. To be trauma informed is to be aware that there is a trap behind the bush where that dog's leg is trapped in. But yes, we do have to talk about the involvement of responsibility here. So to be able to understand the complexity of it, I'm going to talk about individuals separately, and I just needed to listen through all of it to be able to grasp the complexity, because I cannot at the same time talk about it all in one go, because it all needs its separate attention. So we know what it means to be trauma informed now. Now let's talk about the person, the dog, right? The aggressive dog, or the person who's affected by trauma, who's displaying any sorts of behaviors that are not healthy, let's say, either for themselves or for people around them, or for the environment, for the world at large. There's a saying, I believe it's by Carl Jung: if you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. When we're children, we're not responsible for the things that happen to us. No child is. We're born into families that, at least in the physical realm, we don't choose. And so things that happen to us, we're not responsible for that. The adults in our lives should be responsible for that. Those events then affect us for the rest of our lives, whether in a positive way or a negative, or usually it's a mix of both. However, when a person grows up, it is, at some point, it becomes their responsibility to look at the way that their presence affects this world, people closest to them and people further away, and decide whether they want to do something about it. That is the hardest job that people will do, beyond maybe being a parent itself, which also involves a lot of this work, to work on yourself, to be a good parent. To work on ourselves, not because we are ashamed of ourselves or believe we're broken, but because we want better for ourselves and for the world at large. And we take the responsibility of our part because we know that we are as important as every other person on this planet. So we're coming from that bigger perspective of, I am important and the things I do matter, both in good and bad ways. If I say something rude to someone, that matters. If I say something kind to someone, that matters. My belief is that as we grow up and we move into adulthood, it is entirely our responsibility to heal from the things that happened to us that were not our fault, and those things were not our responsibility. However, when you have your children, or when you affect your loved ones or your friends or anyone at all, strangers, your parents are not to blame for that. You are. This is why I said this is complicated, because from one perspective, you're not responsible, but from another you are, right? You did not choose the programming and the trauma that you went through. However, as an adult, you are responsible to undo it all so that you can be a better human being for yourself and for other people. That is something that I need you to understand every single one of us goes through. It doesn't matter where you are on your healing journey, how terrible your trauma was, or how small it was. It's not like we can compare trauma, but we have this notion of big T traumas and small t traumas. Every single human being goes through this. So you're not alone in that, and it's not your sole responsibility. Every single one of us is responsible in the same exact way, in the same exact extent, to the same extent. So this is why this is difficult, because from one end, it's unconscious and subconscious, and it rules our life. And it is our evolution as a human that determines whether we are going to or will be able to step up and do something about that. Whether that means to get more education around trauma and how it affects you, and then what you can do about it on your own, or if you have finances, getting help from people that know how to deal with this. So this is the perspective of the person struggling and suffering from the effects of trauma. That's the possibilities that you have, the paths that you have as an option. Okay, you can continue living the life of the unconscious programming, or you can start to make moves towards something else, which is not easy. It will never be a job that you will get done. It's a lifelong thing, and it's going to be extremely rewarding at the same time. So being on the receiving end means, I guess I could split it in into two things. One is to be able to have some space in you for compassion towards the person in front of you, and to really work towards seeing the bear trap behind the bush, rather than just seeing the aggression. It will not only help you with feeling safer in your experience and feeling more in control and feeling like, you're understanding what's happening, but it will also help them to feel like there isn't really actually anything wrong with them. They're just in a lot of pain. Okay, so that's a really, really helpful step. That's one. And number two is the other extreme of it, to make sure that you're not trapped in this cage of compassion towards them, whereby you stop neglecting your needs and boundaries because you can see that bear trap. And this is really hard if you're an empath. If you feel a lot of what other people experience, if you merge with other people's experiences, you will have, your heart can break from knowing the pain that the other person is from. So how can you ever place a firm boundary? How can you ever state your need when you know why they're the way they are? Well, the answer is you have to. You have to learn. And there's a very good reason for that. Not only is it for your benefit, for obvious reasons, it will help them. If you are compassionate towards them and you compassionately place healthy boundaries with that person, it will help them heal. It will either help them heal within the relationship dynamic itself, or if that's too much for them, they will exit, but it will still help them on their healing journey. So these are the two places that, if you're going to continue being defensive against their aggression that comes from unconscious places, you will get nowhere. You will just get more traumatized, they will get more re-traumatized, and the relationship will become extremely toxic and will fall apart. If you love that person and you actually want to try and build the relationship with them, lead with compassion and understanding, and make sure that at all times you're taking a very good care of yourself by making sure that your needs are still being met. If they cannot be met in the moment by that person, meet them yourself, meet them with your friends, meet them with your relatives, however you need to do that, and place kind but firm boundaries if something is really starting to affect you. Being trauma-informed, one of the things that if you delve into the world of trauma, the one thing you realize is that every single human being carries trauma. Because, as I said, trauma is not the event that happened to you, it's the autonomic nervous system response that did not get completed in the moment. None of us are raised in perfect families that know exactly how to help you through every single situation in life, and sometimes they might do everything they can, but it will still not be enough because of your specific individual intricacies of the way you are, the way your nervous system works. So every single one of us will carry trauma. So that's what I want you to bear in mind when you are on the receiving end, let's say, of this, like whatever behavior, toxic behavior, unhealthy behavior from someone who has trauma, is to understand that you will also have your own patterns of trauma and your own nervous system responses that you've learned as a result of your upbringing, your culture, your trauma. And when you are faced with their trauma that happens from this from some kind of unconscious responses to whatever happened to them a long time ago, you will respond from your own trauma-induced place. That is what it means to be trauma-informed, and that is the answer to the question, is trauma an excuse for bad behavior? It is not an excuse. Trauma is the reason bad behavior takes place. However, we all have a part and a responsibility in healing it, healing the patterns of it, healing each other's, helping each other heal our nervous systems so that we can be overall in a much better place relationally and personally. And I hope this video kind of gives you, first of all, the educational understanding of what's happening to you or your partner or your loved one or your friend, and also what to do about it, both if you are that person and if you're on the receiving end of it. I guess I'm just going to end again with saying those two things that I said already today to make sure they kind of stick a little bit better. If you don't make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Really, really ponder on this quote. If you feel like you don't have control over certain things, if you feel like you can't break out of certain patterns, there's going to be some subconscious material at play that, unless we shine a light on it and bring it out from the shadows into light, it will continue ruling our life and we will think that's our fate. And number two is that we all carry trauma, whether it's small t trauma, big T trauma, developmental, chronic, acute, it doesn't matter, ancestral. We all carry trauma, and we don't need to pathologize that. We don't need to start to give ourselves diagnoses. That's not what this is about. This is about being informed that we all have subconscious programming that we have very little control over until we make it conscious. And from that perspective, from that standpoint, we can be a little bit more compassionate towards each other, show a little bit more understanding, that then in turn helps to propel each and every one of us towards a better future of healthy relationships and just better mental health and physical health as a result. Wow, that was a lot, wasn't it? Please take your time to digest all of this. And for most people, this is extremely new information, and it does turn your world upside down. When you start to see it through this lens, it really does turn your world upside down, because you have to start making amends with yourself and start to question your views of the world and of the people in it and the structures in place. And I don't recommend you do it all in one go. That's all I can say. Take your time with it. If this has been all really triggering, just take a few minutes after this video. Don't just continue scrolling on to the next thing, but take a few minutes to breathe. In fact, let's just do it right now. Let's breathe together. We're not going to do any kind of breath work. We're just going to let our natural breath come back to a healthy state. If you've been holding your breath, if it's really shallow, if it feels like something is there's a brick on your chest, just breathe into the boundary of where you feel the breath is at right now. And try to send your breath down into the belly. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe out through your mouth. You can either keep your breaths, try try to make your breaths deep, or simply try to slow down in the breath. Even if you can't breathe in deeply, just slow right down. And when you've slowed down even more. Slow down even 10% more. And as you breathe, allow your shoulders to drop. Allow the muscles in your neck and your traps to let go just a little bit. Look around the room you're in. Orient yourself. And then just look down at your body. Look down at your legs, at your hands, and just gently pat your legs, or kind of like press into them like in a massaging sort of motion. Feel your legs. And then just, if you need to invite any movement, I just feel like I need to stretch a little bit, so feel free to do whatever you need to do. Start waking up the body, because you've been staring at the screen probably for this whole time, so don't stay seated and immobile for too long. Sends you into a state of freeze, so just make sure you move and come back to the body and take your time to digest this information. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section down below. Subscribe to see more content surrounding trauma, relationships, and spirituality, personal development, all the things surrounding that. And like this video if this was insightful, if it helped you in any way. And I will see you in the next one.